Okay, in this video, we're going to focus on the organ systems of the body. Now, we're going to just go through the list and then we'll take them more individually. But what I do want you to see from the beginning is that the four that I have asterisks by, the integumentary system, skeletal system, muscular system, and nervous system, these are the four that as we go through the semester, we will cover in detail and learn more about those specifically. The other systems we will cover generally in this lecture, but you'll have to wait until AMP2 to get into the details of those systems. So the other systems that we're not going to cover in more detail are the endocrine system, the cardiovascular, the lymphatic, the respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. Now let's look at them a little bit closer so we can at least learn the basic functions of each and then some of the important organs or structures for those systems. So the first one is the integumentary system. Now, as you see here, this includes our skin, hair, and our fingernails. Now, when you think about it, the skin, right, is our external covering. So the purpose of the integumentary system, first of all, is protection, right? It's going to keep our internal structures protected. It helps prevent water loss or excess water gain. It also has many sensory receptors. So we know, right, if I grab this piece of paper the wrong way and I get a paper cut, I'm going to feel that because of the sensory receptors located in my skin. Now, the skeletal system, this is made up of our bones, cartilage, and joints or articulations where the bones come together. And we're going to learn more about bone tissue and all of the important functions that bones have. Our blood cells are produced by this system. But the key thing right now for us to probably focus on is that this is what helps us to move combined with the muscular system, gives our body posture. Obviously, it's going to support and protect our internal organs. So I mentioned the muscular system works with the skeletal system in allowing us to move. We will learn in detail about how muscles contract to allow us to move as we go through the semester. Another important thing to know about that is when our muscles contract, it can produce body heat, so it helps to regulate our body temperature. Now, shown there are tendons. So tendons, that we'll learn more about in detail, are those that they connect our muscles to bones. Our nervous system then is made up of the brain, spinal cord, and other peripheral nerves. The point of our nervous system is it's going to detect and process sensory information. Then it's going to send a message to allow us to respond to that information. So the nervous system can trigger a muscle cell to contract or a gland to secrete a hormone. And we'll learn more about that as the semester goes along. So the endocrine system. Many glands are part of this system. The point of the endocrine system is to produce and or secrete hormones. So hormones are chemical signals that are released into the bloodstream. And these have an effect on cells that have receptors for these particular hormones. So they do a wide range of things. You may, when you go get your blood test every year or periodically, you may have tests done for particular thyroid hormones to see about, if there's an issue with how that controls your metabolism. These glands include the pituitary gland that's located in your brain, the thyroid gland, the pancreas, the adrenal glands that sit atop the kidneys, and then based on the sex, either testes for male or ovaries for female. The cardiovascular system then is going to include our heart, which is responsible for pumping blood through all of those blood vessels that you see, or pumping them through the arteries, and then the veins are going to return blood to the heart. And the whole point of this system is the blood supply is reaching all of our cells and tissues. So it's delivering oxygen, which all of our cells need to live, and nutrients. And then it's returning the waste products from the cells, taking them from the cells. So one thing we'll see as we talk about the respiratory system in a minute is that the respiratory system is responsible for breathing in, taking in oxygen, and then eliminating carbon dioxide waste. So in combination with the cardiovascular system, that oxygen supply is pumped right throughout the body by the cardiovascular system, and the carbon dioxide waste gas that cells produce is brought back to the lungs or the respiratory system via the cardiovascular system. The lymphatic system, so these vessels, part of what they do is return tissue fluid back to the blood supply. This is also, we could call it our immune system, because it is what helps us defend ourselves against foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses. And the organs or the structures are the thymus gland, the lymph nodes that are in various areas of our body, the vessels, the lymphatic vessels, and then the spleen. The respiratory system, as I already mentioned, is responsible for delivering oxygen to the blood and taking the carbon dioxide from the blood and eliminating it from the body. So what's shown here, the nasal passage, the trachea, which is the tube that goes from the back of the mouth, and then it branches and eventually it leads to the lung tissue. The digestive system, this one we're probably much more familiar with. This is what we use to process the food we eat, so we can make use of the nutrients in the food. So we break down the food particles into smaller nutrients that can be absorbed. We also have waste that has to be eliminated by our digestive system from undigested food. Now, the organs of the digestive system. So one organ that's not shown on this figure that I want to point out to you, let me get my pen here, is this tube that travels from the back of the mouth. And it's hard to see there because the liver's there, but it leads right into the stomach. So that tube, there we go. Sorry about my handwriting. The esophagus is this tube that leaves from the back of the mouth and goes to the stomach. Then the next, if we're talking about the passageway of food, it goes down the esophagus into the stomach, and then from the stomach, it empties into the small intestines. Now, I'm going to make a little distinction here. The small intestines are this area that's more medial. The large intestine is more lateral. The small intestine is actually much longer if we stretch that out, but it's based on the diameter of the tube. So the small intestine has a smaller diameter. The large intestine then is when it leaves the small intestine, it goes into the ascending colon, because the large intestine is also called the colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, and then obviously eventually we have exit of waste. Now, there are accessory organs that are part of the digestive system that food doesn't travel through those organs, but they contribute important secretions into the small intestine that helps us to break down our food. And so the liver is one of those, and the gallbladder. So the liver is this large red organ. The gallbladder is this small green structure that's just inferior to the liver. All right, the urinary system, this is going to filter our blood. The kidneys are responsible for filtering our blood and removing waste. It also controls our water balance. So we have 2 kidneys. We have a urinary bladder. The tubes that are traveling from the kidneys to the urinary bladder are called the ureters. And then there's a tube, right, that where the urine leaves the body, called the urethra. We have reproductive system. So the point of a reproductive system is really to produce the sex hormones that make the person male or female. So those characteristics. Also to produce gametes. So what is a gamete? A gamete is a sex cell. So the male gamete would be the sperm, and the female gamete would be the egg. Now the female also is going to have the uterus, which then is going to support the growing fetus and produces milk to feed the baby. I want to take just a few minutes. We've talked about organs, but we've talked about them sort of separate within a particular organ system. We haven't looked at how organs might come together in the body. So let's take a look at these models for a minute. Start with the one on the left. So the first arrow is pointing to this. You can see part of the structure. It actually would be coming from the back of the mouth all the way down, right? And it would eventually branch into the lungs. So this part that it's pointing to, I can see has ridges of cartilage. And I know that this is the trachea. And remember, the trachea is that tube that's part of the respiratory system. So this is carrying air into the lungs. Now, I want to real quickly make a distinction. So this right here would be where the diaphragm would be found, right? That muscular sheet, and that's separating body cavities. So the cavity above the diaphragm, remember what that's called? The thoracic cavity. That's an I right there, sorry. Thoracic cavity. Then the cavity below that is the largest cavity, and that has that long name, abdominopelvic cavity. Okay? So in the thoracic cavity, we have the lungs, right? We have a left and right lung. And if we're looking at this, remember, this is going to be this model's left and right. So this is going to be the right side, and this is going to be the left side. So this would be the left lung, and this would be the right lung. Nestled between the lungs would be the heart, which is obviously found in the thoracic cavity. And we've already labeled this right here as we haven't labeled it, we've identified it, the diaphragm. Now in the abdominal pelvic cavity, this very large structure that's sort of dark red, that's the liver. And then we have the stomach. And we've identified, right, that the large intestine is here. So it's ascending, transverse, and you can't really see the descending part. Then that would make this the small intestine. Now, I want to move to the middle image. And so what this is doing, so this right here, right, would be where the diaphragm would be present. Okay, so above that would be the thoracic cavity, and then we're focused here on the abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, what's happened is all of these structures, the liver, the stomach, the large and small intestine, have been removed so that we can see the organs that are more posterior, right? Because we want to be able to identify those. So we have the left and right kidneys, right? So this would be the right kidney. This would be the left kidney. Then over here, this structure is the spleen. So let me mark. This is the kidney. This structure down here, which might be a little fuzzy, a little hard to see, this is the urinary bladder. Okay, so the spleen that we see really well in this, you can't see it in this image to the left. Maybe you can see a tiny bit of it, but it would be sort of behind and lateral to the stomach there. Now, this image on the right, what I wanted to point out is you have two tubes coming from the back of the mouth. And one of them is made of cartilage. That's your trachea. One of them is made of smooth muscle. So this tube here, okay, you can kind of see the cartilage there. This tube is the trachea. That's part of your respiratory system that's going to lead down to the lungs. The tube that's posterior to that, okay, so this tube right here, where the arrow's pointing, this is the esophagus, and this is part of the digestive system, and that's where when you swallow your food, right, that carries it from your mouth to your stomach. So I wanted to point out, when you're looking at those, the trachea is toward the front or more anterior, right? And and the esophagus is then going to be more posterior or behind the trachea. All right. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.